Okay, today we're going to talk about four small things that are actually very big. When I say small, they're more subtle. A lot of people wouldn't notice them. And they're things that destroy relationships. Now, for the most part, we're talking about like an actual marriage, that type of relationship. But they can be applied really everywhere, to even business partnerships or to friendships, but to a obviously different and lesser degree. What's the first one? Comparison. Comparison destroys relationships all the time. It's this very thing that if if you're constantly comparing your spouse to somebody else. These people that are more attractive, more nice, more dynamic, just the way you like. They dress the way you like. They greet you the way you like. And why doesn't she or why doesn't he? These are they destroy you in the same way that you buy a nice car that you've been working toward for your entire life. You can't wait to have it. You have it, and now all you think about is the car that's better than your car, and so you're dissatisfied with the car that you have. Well, clearly, people, human beings, are more than possessions. But if we think of a person by way of comparison, like a status symbol or something that's just there to satisfy us, as opposed to a human being. I was talking to somebody one time, and they were talking about these comparisons. I wish my wife were a little bit more like this or like that, and I see these other women, and they are like that, and why can't she be like that? And I said, I want to just tell you that's completely unfair. It's unjust. She is not them. So get rid of the comparison game, because I don't care if you have Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt, who, by the way, were just in the movie The Smashing Machine, but in real life, take those two characters and make them a couple. If you are comparing, you're going to find something wrong. You're going to find somebody bigger and more handsome and wealthier and more famous than Dwayne Johnson. And if he's not there now, he's going to be eventually. And the same thing with Emily Blunt. So even two people who you would think are like kind of iconic figures in this can be compared right down to oblivion. And certainly by aging, you can compare, and you're going to find that there's always somebody that's bigger, better, more famous, in better shape, more handsome, whatever it might be, more dynamic. Stop it. The comparison game always leads to destruction. It's one of the reasons that pornography destroys relationships, is because men or women nowadays who watch pornography are constantly comparing their spouse with these iconic figures of beauty, and that's a very bad idea. The second thing is subtle passive aggressiveness. Now, passive aggressiveness is by nature subtle, but I'm talking about things like being upset and somebody saying, "Hey, is everything okay? It doesn't look like everything's okay." No, I'm fine. But then acting like they're upset. Now, there's a difference between, no, I'm fine, because you're working through your emotions, and that's a real thing where, you are fine, but it's not worth talking about, but you're not trying to use the passive aggressiveness as a tool against them. I'm fine, but I'm going to confuse you by acting not fine so that we can ruin our day or evening or week or weekend, right? No. There's a huge difference between sincerely working through an issue non-aggressively, but not wanting to talk about it. Oftentimes because we're like, you know what, my reaction to that isn't really appropriate, but I'm upset. I'm not going to bring it up because it's unfair to the other person. I'm just going to work through it. And you can tell that because even though I'm saying I'm fine and they can tell that I'm not, I'm working toward being a joyful person who's fun to be around, as opposed to that's just like somebody that's punishing the other person, but trying to confuse them while they're punishing them. That never works. And by the way, we do see this in business relationships too, where a person just is like, I'm fine, but they're not. And now the partnership functions slowly. It doesn't really do. And by the way, just non-snilly, the person who is being passive aggressive is never happier because of it. So let's just begin with that. If you're the passive aggressive person in the relationship, you're not going to be happier. You're only going to become more miserable because of it. And the other person is going to be confused. If you're the person that's not passive aggressive and you're dealing with this sort of thing, just rise above it. That's the best that you could possibly do. The third thing is to withhold acts of kindness or small good things, to get somebody a cup of coffee, to a compliment, I love you, a question about their day, noticing little things about them that are important to them, pausing when you're in the midst of something that's important to you to make sure that they know that you're acknowledging that they're important to you. But withholding these things because you're playing a comparative game. Well, you know what? They didn't get my coffee last time, so I'm not going to get theirs. They didn't do the dishes for me last time, so I'm not going to do the dishes for them. I'm keeping track, and I feel like they owe me because I'm doing more. No, that doesn't work either. It never actually satisfies you because it gets you obsessed by the topic. It certainly doesn't get the other person to say, oh, they're not doing things for me, so therefore I'm going to do more for them. No, usually gets that person to say, oh, you're not doing this for me? Well, I'm not going to do that either. And now there's a contest of who can be the worst person in the relationship, as opposed to not paying attention to those things, not keeping score, not being in comparison, not competing with each other, and just doing good things. Don't withhold those. And the last thing is subtle smiles that really belong only to your spouse, but not to somebody else. These happen usually in passive ways. Now, psychology will tell you that men and women respond to these things differently and they do them for different reasons. Women, oftentimes, even especially once they get toward their 40s and now they start to kind of wonder how much time is going to be left with me, with my kind of youthful beauty that I've always had, as just age takes place in all of us. And men and women go through this process a little bit differently, and men and women perceive each other and themselves differently according to it. But when that happens to a woman, she becomes very, very interested in affirmations from other men. Now, this can happen at any age. And men, by the way, can be the same. So anybody with a brain, by the way, knows that men and women react to these things differently. But using that as an example, that smile, that warmth that really is meant only for her husband, when she's getting that look from another guy at an airport, at a restaurant, when she's shopping by herself, and she responds with a look that's plausibly deniable. Oh, it's just being friendly, but really meant something where both of them recognized it. That meant you're interested. And even though we may never see each other again, it's going to be a 15-second interaction while I'm walking by and you're walking by. I know that you left there something for me, and I gave you something too. And that moment only really belonged to your spouse, but I took it. Now, there's a lot of people who would say there's nothing wrong with it. They would attack me for mentioning this. They would say that you're being too scrupulous about this topic. But I know that I'm not. And the reason I know that I'm not is because anybody that's really honest about this thing will say that that one second look can be a second look and a third look until eventually the loyalty is diminished, the interest is gained, and it leads to something actually much more than looks. But let me talk to you about this from a spiritual perspective too. From a spiritual perspective, that's all that it takes. It really only takes for evil or even demons to do their work is to get you to get your eyes off of goodness, off of your spouse, and onto somebody else in their place. Because now they can start to drive the wedge and they can go further and further and further. And they know that you are now susceptible to that sort of temptation. So it's important for us to pray for the strength to not go through that sort of thing, because most of what I'm talking about, many people would say, it's just normal, it's just natural, it's just fine. Yeah, a friendly smile is different. But you'll even notice this. You'll notice that a really faithful man or a faithful woman by themselves walking along, seeing another person that is very attractive, that gives them a little bit of a look or a little attention, and for whatever reason it was, that their response to it is more subtle. It's a subtle smile. It's a smile that says, I'm reserving here. And it's intentionally reserved, but still at the same time, it's polite. Whereas that might be different if you have two couples walking along and they're greeting each other with a smile. And they're greeting kind of the collective group of couples. Hi there, how are you? And you would respond because you are next to your spouse and they are, hi, good, how are you? In this manner that says the circumstance is different. There isn't a privacy taking place here. And so therefore the response is a little bit different. Hopefully these things make sense. So just make sure that you're not doing comparisons. You're not passive aggressive in what you're doing. You're not withholding goodness, and you don't provide subtleties to somebody else that are only deserving of your spouse.